let's talk about generative AI. How many of you guys like generative AI? Show of hands. How many of you guys don't like generative AI? Show of hands. Okay, we got one. He's got courage. How many of you guys don't care or don't know? Okay, even better. Don't know. Okay, so we'll start with that. Maybe, Shirley, a quick definition of generative AI from you.
I would say it's fundamentally creating some kind of material, whether it's voice, picture, data, forecasting, drafting off of LLMs and some other proprietary inputs to create some kind of forecaster.
So LLM, what is LLM?
LLM is a large language model.
Large language model.
Huge data sets.
Right. Massive billions of data elements, and it's used to create systems. Fundamentally, a generative AI model allows you to create a system using machine learning and probability to correct itself and fix itself and learn from itself. There is one problem with it. What's that problem, say it? Geigo? Saadi?
I think hallucinations.
Hallucination, a very good word. What is a hallucination?
It is when incorrectly you give, because LLMs don't understand the context. They don't understand regulatory enablers. They don't understand the policies. So there's a very high chance that it will predict something which is not properly within the context of your framework or properly cited without any sources. So therefore, making sure there's a process of governance and risk around it is critical to make sure we benefit from this.
I think more recently just makes up stuff.
Yeah, it lies,
Yeah.
okay? A hallucination is when a computer decided to lie to you. It's not lying because it's wrong. It's lying because the data set that it's looking at and the question are not aligned, and so we call it a hallucination. And it wants to please you because you asked the question, right? And by the way, what is a typical ChatGPT request cost right now? Do anybody know? 30 cents. Very high, actually, if you think about it. And by the way, what is the power requirement for this?
A lot.
A lot. So much so that guys like Microsoft are talking about nuclear power to power this stuff. So let's back it up a little bit more. So a little bit of definition, a little bit of hallucination. What's the positive side of this?
I think today it's a lot of productivity gain. Tomorrow, hopefully it can be, we think of kind of your personal financial advisor on your phone, but that's a tomorrow, day after tomorrow, or something like that. But today there is unarguably a bunch of productivity gain internally.
All right. John?
Yeah, I think that AGI today is, since trained on massive data with pretty much, it knows everything. It looks to me it's like an encyclopedia. You can think and answer questions more than many people. In terms of in a real world application, I think it can be used to do some of the basic work so that we can release our human beings from doing this basic stuff and focus on something that's more like intelligence intensive tasks.
Okay. But you McKinsey guys have a different idea of that.
So I think the first wave we are seeing is around productivity, which is we're seeing a lot of applications where in banking, for example, there's a lot of write-ups, whether it is investment thesis or credit memos or account plans. A lot of the information about industry, about the company, about the strategy, the advisors spend a lot of that time coming up with stuff, and we're seeing a lot of gains there that how this can be standardized with the right prompt engineering, how the right questions come out, which actually helps in insights, right? So productivity gain is there. We're seeing in technology, for example, a lot of coders it's helping them code faster. What we're not seeing right now is that, the that it will significantly enhance your skill, right? So if you're a basic coder behind the trajectory, and suddenly you become the best coder, right? So the people who are good at their job, they actually know how to benefit more from someone who's maybe a bit behind. What we do seeing is, I think in the future, there are some growth applications which will come around, like hyper-personalization, many of these things, but it's not that easy, right? Because financial services is a heavily regulated industry and the regulations are very different from country to country. So for example, in UAE, there are a lot of private information which a lot of the companies are not publicly listed. So that information, bringing that onto the LLM models is not that easy. But the good, I mean, for us, Gen AI is like the iPhone of the mobile industry, right? So there was AI for 50 years, and Gen AI, we think, is the iPhone moment of this industry, and now I think the next S-curve will start.
So Gen AI is democratizing machine learning, pattern recognition, all what was considered traditional AI, right? To make computers smarter or humans smarter? Shirley?
Oh, it's both. Both, I would say. I mean, what's beautiful about Gen AI is that it learns on itself. So I guess making computers smarter in that sense, because you're creating scenarios, and then you're creating scenarios on top of that. Obviously, making humans smarter. I love, Saadi, your example about a lot of these routine tasks and productivity. Techstars actually has a portfolio company called Docufy that does exactly that, right? It's creating sort of sims and other presentations a lot easier than a lot of the manual work that analysts are spending a lot of time doing. So I would say it's both, of course.
So I want to be a little controversial and ask you, is it making humans dumber?
You know, actually, that's a really, so what is that movie, WALL-E? Do you remember?
WALL-E, yeah.
Where people, is it WALL-E where people sit and they're sipping a Slurpee? Is that the movie? Yes.
Right, yeah.
There is a scenario where sometimes it's in the back of my head, and I think if everything is so easy, I have children, I have a 10 and a 12-year-old, and we often, when I was your age, we didn't have this, we didn't have that. And you had to do more work in order to get very simple things done. And so, I mean, what you're saying is not, it's not an outsized case, right? Because now it's so much easier to do things with ChatGPT. You don't learn the fundamentals. I was speaking with a lawyer friend of mine, and there's so many tools now to help people in the legal profession do research, right? And it takes away from the learning of the very junior lawyers who then don't get to do the research and the case study and understand the nuances of a case. So potentially, yes.
But that's true of every technology, right? If you wind the clock back a few thousand years, the hunter-gatherer knew how to survive 30, knew how to self-medicate, how to, which mushrooms were poisonous. Do we know any of that stuff? No. So are we dumber than the hunter-gatherer? Probably not, right? So I think the idea is that, as these technologies happen, what is smart changes, and how you apply your smarts changes.
Hold on. Up till now, humans are still in charge of critical thinking. Machines and technology was about speeding things up, not necessarily thinking, right?
Let me give you one example.
All right.
There used to be a huge industry of consumer underwriters who used to make judgmental decisions on whom to lend to or not. We don't use any of them. We use predictive AI, not generative AI, but predictive AI has taken away weather forecasting, right?
So explain for the audience, explain the difference, predictive versus generative.
Well, it's not a black and white line, but predictive AI is old style AI, which is kind of out of fashion, but where I think there's still a ton of value to be had. And these are typically things which actually give you a probabilistic answer back. So it says, what is the likelihood of something happening? And it'll give you an answer between 0 and 1. That's basically what a predictive AI does. It does not generate text, or if it generates text, it will generate text out of a set of predetermined text solutions where, again, based on that probabilistic outcome, it says, most likely this person is asking me this question, this is the answer I have to give. So that's, I guess, the difference. The reason people kind of like predictive AI a bit more is that it's controllable. It doesn't hallucinate because you have given it the data. You know exactly what data you have been able to give. And while it's not entirely explainable, it's still black box. Because you have more control on the data you have given it, and because it's also only generating a probability back, you can really investigate the model with a greater degree of precision. And that's why financial services has been using predictive AI for a long time and has taken away a lot of critical thinking. I would agree that, yes, this will take away critical thinking for a lot of people, but also, I think, forces us to critically think around what are the right questions to ask. Would this model have had the right exposure or not? And you are also right, that a lot of us will not do that.
So let's ask John that, because John, you're coming from a different place, right? Is it, again, same question, but a different thing. Is it going to diminish critical thinking, or how do we use it to enhance critical thinking?
Sometimes I argue with myself.
Sometimes?
It's a good thing.
Well, sometimes I think it's this way, sometimes that way. While AGI, well, generally speaking, my true opinion is that like a generative AI, it's good just for now. However, it could create some real problems. Like if you say, like I said, okay, it can help people to do simple things. Okay, which means that we may not hire college graduates to do simple stuff because their job, a lot of them may not be as good as I rely on ChatGPT. That's very true. In my own work experience, I would rather just ask questions to Microsoft Copilot.
Wait, hold on. So I'm not going to hire the junior guy, but then that junior person won't be able to learn to become a senior person.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Right. So before, I know this is all about fintech, but fintech is the finite side of that. And I was thinking, let's set the background for the larger thing context so we know what we're talking about and what the risks are, right? Yeah. You're giving me a weird look. Go for it. Okay.
So I think there are many risks associated with this, right? So
So give top 3 risks.
So one is a lot of folks are now using ChatGPT, but there are no risk guidelines within an organization how to use ChatGPT. So there is a risk you are, let's say you're in an environment where you cannot share data with OpenAI or you cannot insert that data, but a lot of coders or analysts who are at a very junior role are using that. So this needs to be moderated. Second is what we talked about. So when you send personalized messages to customers, I mean, for example, I can address you as dear lovely guy, but you need to moderate this.
Other than my wife, he's the only person who said dear lovely guy to me.
So exactly. I cannot send you that message as a bank or a fintech. So I need to.
Well, if you're giving me money, you can send me that message, right?
So exactly. So I think that there are risks associated with this, and therefore, it's not that, I mean, ChatGPT is obviously accessible. I have an application and all, right? But for an institution, it's not that easy, right? It has to be built on the foundations of your cloud. It has to be built on your foundations of good data governance. So yes, you can do 1 or 2 things in a controllable manner, but the real kick would come when an institution who's been working for many years on a traditional core data sets on AI, building that platform for this application, right? That is the difference here between companies who will pilot 1 or 2 or scale up, right? So yes, there are less barriers to entry, like AI, where you need a lot of good data. ChatGPT or GenAI uses a lot of unstructured data, but after a while, you'll see that those barriers to entry are still there, especially in an environment where a lot of information is sitting on private servers.
Yeah, and so let's go to where, Shirley, you're in Techstars, which deals with a lot of uncertainty, because it's early stage startups, right? Startups. So there, for a moment, there's not even the data. So how do you train something when the data doesn't exist? And then is it even valuable? And where do you find the value in generative AI?
I guess I'm going to answer from our perspective. I mean, we build data, yes, as a company, because we have 4,000 portfolio companies. We'll invest in 800 companies this year, so we're building data in that way. The companies we invest in, to answer your question, they are the companies that are building these applications in Gen AI. So they are using large language models to build their data. So yes, they are using existing data sets, and they're building their own proprietary data sets, I would say. So for example, there's a portfolio company called Cobalt in our network, and what they do is they actually do portfolio management for asset managers, PE firms, VCs, et cetera. And they have this tool that actually helps collect all this information from companies and then create Gen AI on top of that for things like cash flow and forecasting analysis. So yeah, they're building it along the way, starting with a basis. But I'm not sure if I'm answering your question fully.
No, it's good, it's
Yeah.
good. So now when you have banks, like with you, Jay, you have a bank. You're highly regulated.
Yep.
Now in that environment, how do you take this very same context like Shirley is saying? And you want to make a credit decision on an early stage startup, and Shirley says, look, I have all this great stuff. Make a decision based on this data. And you're like,
Yep, okay. So from a credit decision standpoint, I am still not quite convinced that Gen AI is there, and I think I would continue to using predictive AI to do that. Potentially Gen AI maybe could be used in the setup that we're talking about in providing some more structured, unstructured data, and then I would again predictive data. So that's where I would kind of do that. But the meaning of data has changed quite a bit.
very good. Okay, so old meaning?
Yeah. So the old meaning was a set of numbers and people, right? Or customers and their attributes, so to speak, or what they did. I think, for example, a very specific use case that we are doing today with Gen AI is that it suggests our customer service agents who are serving chat very specific responses for customer queries. So how do we do that? We take one of the LLMs that are there, in this case OpenAI, through Microsoft, and we train it on our knowledge database. Right, so where all the questions that our customers have asked, and there are answers, or different things and it gets trained there, and then the quality of that response becomes significantly better.
So is
the data
the human talking to the customer, or is the system talking to the customer? Or
so
both?
right now we are still having the human intermediated, right, because of the hallucination issue, and we'll have to see when that goes away. So what now happens is the customer asks the question, the AI will suggest a solution to the agent, and then the agent can choose to use that as is. But the other clever thing that it's also able to say is that here is what I'm saying, and this is the basis on which what I'm saying it at, right? So it's able to kind of point to the bit of the knowledge database that is looked at. So what my point? So that's how it kind of does, and then the agent can use it or say the unhelpful, which then is a learning curve for the AI, and hopefully it'll after enough unhelpfulness it'll get there. But what I was trying to say was that the data has gone from numbers to actually lots of text, and actually even videos, right? Because we put explanatory videos, and that has become the data set instead of the data set being kind of numbers, which is interesting because it's also a lot easier. I wouldn't say it's easier to generate. It still requires time and effort to actually generate that data, but I think it still is easier to generate than say the customer behavior data and so on and so forth. So that's where I think the behavior.
I have a question on that, which is so it went from numbers to text.
Yeah.
So numbers plus text,
and
right?
video.
And
video.
And and video.
Yeah.
Right. We'll talk about the video.
Yeah.
But John, when you go from numbers to numbers plus text, you're now adding conditionality to it, right? And when you're doing conditionality, isn't the variance even higher of error?
Well, the text, so in the past, I think the banks, financial industry, companies, they use mostly data, structured data.
Structured data,
Yeah, text is more called unstructured data. But the way that before the emergence of large language model, the way that we handle unstructured data, we're still going to just transform that from unstructured data to structured data.
Right.
Yeah.
So what you're looking for is the pattern, right? And a pattern is really sequence of numbers at the end of the day, right? And compliance to a sequence. So we're still doing the same thing. The only difference is now my 8-year-old niece can manipulate it, and before it required an engineer from you guys, right?
Almost.
Right. I mean, she reached out to me the other day. She's 8, and she said, Uncle Supreet, guess what? I asked ChatGPT to do my homework.
See, isn't that scary though?
Yeah, so that's why I was like, aren't you supposed to do the homework? She's like, yeah, but, Then I said, what if the ChatGPT lied? See, she's only 8 years old. She hasn't thought of hallucination yet.
Yeah.
So she was like, can it do that? And for the audience, this is a very important thing for you guys to understand. You have to ask that question. Is ChatGPT lying? Is it hallucinating? And how do you develop the parameters to reduce or minimize that, right? Saadi, how do you do that? Oh, wait, let's him, he's been quiet for too long.
I think I want to come to two important points. One is, I think Gen AI complements AI, right? So what it's not a replacement, right? I think for years we have seen machine learning models. Now we're seeing where machine learning model, let's say, do prediction.
Predictive AI, right.
And then let's say coming back to the same example, in a call center or service agent, they can ask questions to an output, and the predictions can come to them. So they can ask about the customer, they can ask about the cash flows, and everything you need about that customer, right? So it is just making this accessible for everyone. I think there was also a point on is it making people dumber? I think the lazy ones for sure, right? I know someone, for example, one of our clients has no technology background, right? The other day I was sitting with him, he was coding. So he had never done in his life, but he was doing coding and he was fixing the code and he was making certain investment decisions. So the point is, it is enabling decision making. Right now, you cannot trust on full decision making. So credit, investment decisions, regulatory decisions. You cannot just completely outsource this to ChatGPT. So there is a skill enhancement we are seeing, which is shifting so people are more comfortable on how to use this technology as opposed to a complete replacement. So yes, we're seeing that skill changing completely, and a lot of that demand is coming from that. How do you, let's say, in a typical financial institution, 90% of the people are not exposed to AI and Gen AI. There are 5-7% who are maybe exposed, right? So how do you take this 90% and make them aware or improve their skill set so at least that decision-making process becomes simpler?
So how do you train them? So here's the thing. What's the average age of the people in the institution, particularly financial institutions? What do you say, 30s?
Yeah, late 30s, 40s. Yeah.
All right, so let's say 30s. They're still young enough. What's their knowledge level?
Yeah.
They have a degree?
Yeah.
Right, or at least some advanced education? Right. Here's the other question is, it's very easy to train humans who are untrained, but very hard to retrain humans who are trained a certain way. So will the AI have to bend to the human, or will the human have to bend to the AI? John, you're looking at me like, okay.
Well, I think it's to train human beings from who has previous trained for certain knowledge is a little bit difficult. However, the good thing about AI is that you can train that, you can just wipe out all the previous knowledge and retrain it with the new knowledge. That's what, in Dyna.AI, that's what we are doing. We filter out some irrelevant information from the training data. Only feed the training process with relevant information.
Okay.
Now, if we want to change to a different field, we just redo that process.
So what do you do with all these humans then?
Humans,
remember, we're growing humans. Population's getting bigger. You got to put them to work somewhere.
yeah, it's
Or they will create revolution,
yeah.
right?
You are forcing me to say something really.
It's my job, okay? So I got to do that. I'm like a bad hallucination.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is totally a thought question for everyone in the group. I think one thing that mentally challenging for me for Gen AI is just the fact that it's very hard. It's almost impossible to audit, right? And so if you're doing some kind of tasks that requires you to go back and say, okay, do it a little bit differently, it's impossible to figure out like what was the thought pattern that came to the final conclusion that they presented in front of you. And so your question about are we training do we need to think like them, or do they need to think like us? Is a really deep one. I don't know, because I don't know if humans have the ability to assemble billions of data points all at once. But some people say, well, but then there's that instinct, right? So and there are certain things that we can react much faster than the machine, like sentiment.
So you guys know GIGO, right? Garbage in, garbage
Oh,
out.
okay, yeah.
Right? And in AI, the problem is it compounds itself because it's not just garbage in from data, it's also garbage in from process. Because you have data plus a process plus an answer to equal an answer, and now you've got multiple layers of failure. I think, and this is, I call this, and Paul and I, we're founders of Raiven Capital, we coined a term called operational AI. You have to build parameters beyond the data to qualify the process so that the process itself converges. And converges to a quality level with a high metric of quality. Only then will the regulators who govern all of us in fintech say this can make sense. The interesting piece is, how many of you guys know about the dog test? They showed AI a million pieces of dog pictures, and so the moment you showed it a picture of a dog, it said, that's a dog, woof woof. Then they showed the AI a cat, and it didn't know what to do. And so here's the interesting piece of this when you sit down and start working it and say, how do we operationalize this? The interesting piece is AI is really good at taking that knowledge, compounding it back into a nice thing and give you a framework. Humans are really good at taking the framework and then bringing different data sets and doing thinking that is horizontal while the AI can go deep, right? So don't you think this is some kind of marriage that if you train the human to become the quality control, that you might be able to have some value? Saadi?
Yeah, what we call is hybrid intelligence, right? So
Hybrid intelligence. Okay, write this one down, guys.
yeah,
You have to see if you fit in the hybrid.
and over the last 3-4 years, when this has really taken off, and especially last year, all the use cases which are happening, there's a lot of human involvement. So it's not like the machine will do something and people have no control. It has to be regulated, whether it is about writing, investment. The good thing is that the scale up is much faster. So if let's say you're doing a pitch book, you do the first 5 pitch books very well, then AI can do scale up much faster. You can do the next 10, 20 much faster, right? So it is hybrid intelligence. We have seen, and what is important is that, coming back to your audit point, that it is not only the developers or the technology folks who are responsible for this. The business is equally responsible, risk is equally responsible, audit is equally responsible. And therefore, that upskilling is required at all levels. Some will need faster, some will be upskilled faster than the others, and which is fine. But I think to make it work, it is something which is a holistic thing. And that's
yeah, but our compensation systems in companies are not designed to have cross-silo work, right?
Exactly, and that's why, and the good thing is a lot of this has been tested with the digital and technology transformation, which a lot of institutions have done, right? How to work collectively. And therefore, it is something which can be done. I mean, the cat is out, right? So it needs to be managed now. I do think AI, Gen AI specifically, what we call it is it's a great equalizer. Because historically, one institution, let's say, has an advantage over the other institution, a country over the other, but this is a technology where everyone is starting at the same level, every institution is starting at the same level, so therefore there's an opportunity to create much more value if you do the right things.
Okay, Jay, how do you compete in this environment?
Well, I disagree with the premise that it's a great equalizer.
Finally, someone disagreeing. Good.
I think actually it's an unequalizer on multiple dimensions.
How?
So one, of course, in the tech world, it's less of the fintech, but in the tech world, it clearly has concentrated power even more. There are only so many companies that have the resources to create the compute power and the electricity and everything to create the LLMs that are there. And that means the monopolists that are there are going to get even further entrenched. So that's one. Two, I think this is one space where I feel, to your point of compounding value, there is compounding value. Just like there's compounding error, there's also compounding value. So people who can embrace it earlier will actually, again, have a huge amount of advantage. So companies that are set up with cleaner data, with a workforce that actually understands data in a more deep way, that is more inquisitive, are going to, and can actually move, to your point, across silos, right? Because some of the problems you're solving, you might think it's an operation problem, but might be a product problem or whatever. So kind of actually that can really come across and work across silos. Those guys will get a bigger advantage and move faster.
So what's
I
your
see it as a
edge?
great disruption-ish.
What's your edge?
Our edge is that we've been always set up almost as an AI company. So we've been using predictive AI incredibly deeply since 2015. You asked the question of how do you train these people? So clearly, when as being a regulated bank, when these things came about a year ago, we were like, oh, how many people are actually using this? How do we stop them from using it? So we just did you look at your systems and say how many people have been calling Bard or ChatGPT, and you could see that almost a third of the workforce was already calling Chat or kind of Bard, ChatGPT or Bard once a day at least, right? So you're already seeing a workforce that's actually kind of leaning forward on that. Having data organized in a fashion that actually is pretty usable, being able to, today we are able to simultaneously, using Amazon, but simultaneously actually, evaluate OpenAI, Claude, the Anthropic models, and Llama very quickly and say, for this use case, this is working better. Because this is a very fast-changing thing. I want a technology architecture that says, okay, we suddenly have a new model, which is going to be a lot better, replace, retune. So the people who can move that fast.
I've never heard a banker ever use the word technology architecture before. So that itself is evolution, right?
Yeah. So those are the things that will create the edge. And I feel this is going to be a bigger problem for the big banks. And I think,
compounding value, you mentioned a very interesting thing. We understand compounding failure, but compounding value is a very interesting thing. All of us sitting here are not digital natives. We're digital immigrants because many of us learned mathematics without devices, right? We can say that.
I don't know. I got my first email account in 1994, so it's a long time
but you weren't 5 years old, right?
She might have been, who knows?
She might have been, right? Okay. However, the next wave of young people are digital natives. They don't think twice about using these technology tools. And if you think about, we are part of the, let's call it the fourth industrial revolution, where we're going from an industrial economy to an informational economy. They're going to be part of the fifth industrial revolution, where they're going from a non-augmented economy to an augmented AI-enabled economy, right? I'd love to ask each one of these to give me one example of where you think it's going to be successful and one example where it's going to fail. Shirley?
Wait, say that question again. I'm not following.
So, augmented economies, new, younger people, right? They're all 20 years younger than us. They're digital natives. One example of where it'll become something very interesting and where it could have some risks.
Oh, I mean, I'm going to generalize. I don't know if I have a good specific example, but I would say that obviously we're at the stage with Gen AI building now where there is literally a niche being built for every single sort of point-to-point solution you can think of, right? So back to the kind of WALL-E, people kind of sipping Slurpee, having an easy life, like that really would be the future, I think, for this next generation. I think the tough part, the thing where it fails is going back to your original point, and this is maybe a little dystopian, which is that there's going to be a portion of the population that, to your point, is not lazy and goes and really takes advantage of this and builds and learns. And then there's going to be a vast majority of the population that now doesn't actually have to think about how to solve problems in a critical way. And that is a pretty scary future to think about, both technology really enabling, but then concentrating the knowledge base, if you will, and the kind of forward-moving motion in a very specific, narrow segment of people in the world.
So, Saadi and Fintech, the same thing, but now with a different thing. How are you going to watch out for the scammers that are using this?
I think that's a great issue actually, and I think the key thing is finance industry is still very regulated, where it's well protected, and we are seeing scammers, but they're not coming from the fintech right now. They're more, when people's asking for OTP and whatnot. So I think that will continue to happen. What I do think is that the freelance business is going to rise. It's less to do with fintech, but overall, you mentioned people who are very good at this from a very early age. Freelance business is going to rise. Where it's going to hit is critical thinking, putting books, years of knowledge, years of research, which has taken us to this level, right? That is definitely an area where we do think it's going to take a bit of a hit, right? But freelance business is for sure a new vertical which is emerging. We're already seeing this in Asia. We're seeing this in the Middle East, right? That this is going to become a vertical which no one estimated how big this would become.
Okay. John, a different way of asking this question, which is, so I decide right now we're doing simple scams, phishing, trying to get your password. What happens when they become very complicated scams, because the same AI for good can be used for bad, and how do you police that?
I think the ways that to prevent this kind of scamming is that we are not say you provide us a loan applicant provides some information like the passport or ID to the bank, but we are not just look at what they provided. That's a self-provided information. The bank still needs to just cross-check such information from verified data sources. So even if this applicant can provide something in a different third party's identity, however, it cannot just it's not easy to get banks forward to approve the loan. So I would say generative Gen AI and predictive AI, they have different use cases in finance industries. It does not mean, which means that it does not, because of the emergence of Gen AI, then it's going to replace the role of predictive or discriminative AI in financial services.
Very cool. So we have a minute left. Jay, you have last word on this one.
Well, I think scamming probably a bigger problem with politics. If you look at the U.S. election, what's going to happen there, and the deep fakes and disinformation. Actually, the production of disinformation is going to go up. I think that's where the bigger problem is going to be, not in financial services as much.
Well, I don't know. You can have video where Supreet's video,
No.
COVID made us all digital
there's no
communicators,
I mean,
right?
there was this famous case where I think somebody scammed a video. I think it was I want to say it was a Middle Eastern bank which actually ended up sending $10 million somewhere else because the CFO was scammed. These things will exist. I think actually AI can be a good catcher of AI. So I would be training AI to depict fraud, because that'd be much better at this than us finding it out, would be my answer. But I do feel scamming is going to be a bigger problem outside financial services than in financial services.
So thank you. We have 21 seconds. In these 21 seconds, I want to do one thing. We hope you got a lot of information, not from the answers, but even more so to ask the right questions. Thank you, panel. You guys are wonderful. I really appreciate it. That was it, folks. It's a wrap.
Thank you.